Hi, I'm Jeremy Watson, CEO of Bedrock Investment Property. Now, our company is a little different than most companies out there. It's technically two companies. Bedrock Property Administration actually helps with the day-to-day business management that comes with real estate ownership. What a lot of people don't realize when they're buying a piece of investment property is that there's actually work that falls on the owner, even if you have a property manager. A property manager effectively only markets the property for rent, puts it up on all the sites, answers the phone calls, shows the property when someone wants to come out and see it, does the background checks and eviction database checks, make sure that the person has good credit, right? And they place the tenant. And then they deal with the day-to-day issues that happens when the tenant's there. And if an eviction becomes required, they'll even do that too. So people think if you hire a property manager, you don't have to do anything else. That couldn't be more wrong. That's catastrophically wrong. Truth is, when you own a piece of real estate, there's a bunch of other stuff that you need to do besides just renting it. You probably should set up an LLC. Now, the reason for an LLC is to give you protection from liability. When you're owning real estate, you own an actual physical asset that's sitting in the actual real world with an actual person living inside of it. And if you have a slip and fall on a piece of real estate that you own, you could be sued personally. You need to set up an LLC and protect your asset from your liabilities and to protect your liabilities from your asset. It's called internal and external protections. It's really important. Now, to set up an LLC, most people just don't bother, or most people super overpay a lawyer to do it. And the truth is, it's not that complicated, but it is complicated. When you're gonna set up an LLC, you're gonna have to have the right documents, you're gonna have to go to the right sites, you're gonna have to pay someone a fee, you're gonna have to try not to get gouged, and then you're gonna have to get the LLC set up with the state. But once you have it set up, you have to keep it in compliance, okay? Every state's different. Some states have, they all have annual reporting to some level, but some states you have to file your internal documents with the state. Some states have a franchise or excise tax that has to be paid once a year. They're going to mail something out. Some states don't have that. Some states allow you to file a fonts exemption under some regulatory statutes of the state where you don't have to pay the franchise and excise tax. Could save yourself 10% off the bottom line, but you got to follow all those little nuances and keep your property in compliance, aside from just paying someone and getting it set up. What we see most often is people, number one, just don't do it because it's a huge dang hassle and it's expensive. Or number two, they do it and then they let it fall out of compliance, so it was a hassle and it was expensive and now it's worthless. Or number three, they managed to do all of that work, but it's basically a full-time job. So what we see most often is people just go naked. They don't bother having an LLC. That's a huge mistake, all right? It's a huge mistake, because if you have a net worth of $1 million to $2 million and don't think that there's people out there who are renting properties who'd love to take a big bite out of you in a lawsuit, you may be wrong. And that's not an area where we want to be wrong. Number two, you want to be able to set up the right bank accounts. I know that sounds dumb, but when you set up a personal bank account, it's very different from when you set up a bank account for an LLC. And the way you treat that bank account has to be very different than the way you treat a personal bank account. The truth is, you cannot commingle money in an LLC. Okay, that's the biggest way to pierce the corporate veil or your LLC veil and get yourself sued when you thought you were protected. If you commingle funds, if you treat that like your own personal piggy bank. And the truth is, when you set up an LLC, your compliance doesn't just stop with having its own bank account and not commingling. You have to have internal distance from your LLC and treat it with fiduciary responsibility. So you have to actually have the right documents in place and articles of organization. You have to have meetings every year that you sign. You have to have an initial meeting or at least a unanimous consent in lieu of a first meeting. There's a lot of stuff that goes into having an LLC be in proper compliance, right? Most people, again, do it wrong, don't do it at all, and that's a huge problem. You set up your bank account, you make sure your bank account's sending you notices. Well, how do you know if someone's accessing your bank account? Setting up the right notices, the right red flags, the right systems are all important pieces of business management. Has nothing to do with property management. It's just making sure that your property is performing properly. On top of all that, if you're gonna have a property manager, which I like, you're gonna have to find that property manager and vet that property manager and talk to that property manager and keep that property manager honest. I'll be perfectly candid. Property managers are absolute extremes. I had a really good friend once tell me that his property manager couldn't do a worse job if he was trying. Okay? The truth is that happens a lot. And then there's a lot of times where there's just errors or the property manager's trying to rob you blind. You gotta keep an eye on property management, because some of them are very good and some of them are hideous, and they can completely change the whole game plan when it comes to owning investment real estate. So you got to find them, vet them, deal with them, figure out what your dispute resolution is going to be, figure out if you can get leverage and work with that property manager. All of that is necessary, and that's not property management. That's business management. Finally, you got to look at your accounting. Okay, I have so many clients who sold me when we first met, oh, I've got this piece of real estate, it's a real honey, it's wonderful, been wonderful for years, my property management, perfect. When we dig into those assets and realize that they're receiving a 1% rate of return on a $2 million asset, they realize real quick it's actually not good. When they realize they're $600 a month under market rent and the property manager's just asleep at the switch, they get real mad real quick. All right? When they realize that their property manager has been padding bills for 10, 20 years, all right, because they're not a good property manager. And when they realize that that great tenant that they thought was great is actually a quiet tenant because they're $600 a month under market rent, and they have let everything just go to garbage in that property. We're talking wet walls and sewage backing up, just a nightmare property. That tenant moves out $600 under rent, and you realize, wait, that tenant wasn't great. It was a living disaster. I was just unaware. You got to keep track of all of that. Again, not property management. That's business management. And then you've got to keep track of your asset. I cannot believe the number of people I talk to who say, oh, I've got this great piece of property, it's working real well, that should have sold that property 15, 20 years ago. They should have reinvested in another market. The cash on cash has gone to garbage and they just didn't pay attention to it. You got to know what your rents are supposed to be. What is market level rent? What is market level sales price? When's the right time to sell? When did the market peak? Is it a cyclical market? Are we expecting another peak in the future? There's so much that goes on beyond just property management. That's business management, making sure your property is performing correctly. That's what we do at Bedrock Property Administration. We add the business management component and experience so that the properties perform the way they're supposed to. And we're your advocate trying to keep the property managers honest, because your bottom line at the end of the day is our bottom line. So we'd love to help. If you want to talk about any of these things or ask any questions, feel free to call us. We'll give you a hand. We'll help you out. We've done it 4,000 times before. Have a good day.